Hello and welcome everybody to this new series that we're doing here at Prisma about real-world open source projects that are built on top of Prisma. We're kicking off this series with a project called Documenso. It's an open source document signing tool, kind of an alternative to DocuSign, which you might have heard of. I'm talking to their founder and tech lead, Lucas Smith, who's based in Australia and who has been coding since he was 12 years old. In our conversation, we're going to talk a little bit about his background and how he came to found Documenso. And we're, of course, diving into the tech stack. We're talking about the rewrite that they recently did, how they picked the technology for the application that they're building. We're also talking about the way how they introduced Prisma into their application and even some tricky situations that they needed to solve with Prisma. So some real world problems that they ran into and the workarounds that they found for that. And in the end, we're even going to dive into the code base. We're going to take a look at the structure of the monorepo. We'll get a great overview of how the application is being built. And we're even going to follow the data flow from a request from the front end that is made on the UI. And we're investigating how the data is flowing from the front end through the API layer to the backend into the database. Hey, Lucas, welcome to our new show where we are talking about real-world open source projects that are based on Prisma. You're our first guest here. It's great to have you.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
All right, you're actually based in Australia, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It's currently 8 p.m. I've got my dog snoozing behind me.
Great. We're recording this in the morning for me, so we have quite a time difference. So I'm really grateful that you actually could make the time. Why don't we start and you just give a quick introduction of yourself? What's your background? How did you get into technology in the first place?
Yeah, no worries. So I'm Lucas, obviously, the co-founder of Documenso. I've been a developer for a while, professionally for maybe 5 or 6 years. I've sort of lost track. And before that, I've been coding since I was like 12,
Oh, wow.
coming up on like RuneScape and other video games and creating private servers. So yeah, I've had a lot of fun.
What was your first programming language when you started with 12?
Oh man, PHP, obviously, the
Yeah.
best programming language.
Very cool. All right, let's start talking about Documenso a little bit. So what is it and how did you come up with the idea for it?
Yeah, so my co-founder Timmer came up with the idea. He's been working on it since late or mid 2022. Obviously, like document signing right now is a really terrible sort of ecosystem. You have a couple big players that own pretty much the entire thing, and they have no real incentive to provide better support or better APIs or integrations or anything like that. They know that you can't really go anywhere, and building document signing into your products is super hard. So most people rely on these massive contracts with DocuSign and PandaDoc and so on, just so they can add signing functionality to their app. Timmer figured it doesn't have to be that way. We should have one open source signing framework so no one has to build it from scratch again. It should be high quality and accessible so people, even from countries with lower economical means, can also have access to high quality signing that is trusted and secure. But we're not just building like a prettier DocuSign. The intention here is to build the Documenso application and then scale it into the Documenso infrastructure so everyone can have their own signing platform built in.
So in the future with your tools, with your products, like companies will be able to run their own document signing infrastructure on their own servers basically as well, right?
Yep, that's correct.
And how do you run the company? I think you're also very, very open about how the company is being run, right? I saw on your website that all the like salaries of the employees and everything is very open. So like what's up with that and that kind of open startup idea?
Yeah, so open startups have been super interesting to us for a very long time, with like Bare Metrics and obviously Cal and many more. The idea is obviously being open source. Our code is already open. We figure why can't we open as much of everything else as we can? That way, not only is it more beneficial for us because we don't have to worry about what we can and cannot say as you do in traditional proprietary companies. But we can also help the newer generations of entrepreneurs by seeing exactly what we're doing with our metrics and our learnings as we go.
I love that. It's really the idea of building in public taken to the next level, right? I really love that. It's incredible.
Yeah, no, we're super excited. Hopefully, it plays out super well.
All right, let's dive a little bit into the technical side of things. I think that's why most people tuned in here today. So, how did you actually pick the tech stack for Documenso? What were the criteria? How did you evaluate the technologies? How did you go about that?
Yeah, so the initial technologies were picked by Timmer with a typical React Next Prisma sort of stack.
Hmm.
He just picked what was accessible, easy, and had a lot of documentation behind it. We've recently, though, undergone a complete rewrite from the ground up. And we did this to enable the scale that we were talking about for creating signing infrastructure rather than a signing platform. This involved picking and deciding to keep a whole bunch of technologies. So we've stuck with Next.js because it is the most widely used React meta framework, and
Hmm.
React is the most widely known front end framework. So
Hmm.
if we want to retain our open source roots, we figure we should pick something that is both easy for contributors and has a wider community of people that actually know the tool. Like we could have picked Svelte, and Svelte is a fantastic language, but we want to make sure that we are also accessible to everyone that wants to participate in
Right.
Documenso.
Which version of Next.js are you using actually?
We're currently on Next 14 with the app directory, server
With the
components, and server actions.
right.
It's been a very fun experience, but I've been using it since it was launched last year with
Hmm.
several other projects. So I feel very confident in using it for this. And part of being an open source project is also being interesting for contributors to come to. So being one of the first few big open source projects using the app router will hopefully entice more people to come, learn from us, potentially contribute back, which is something that we're very interested in doing. Obviously, being a big open source project, we want to provide a code base that's an excellent place to learn from. Not only are we building a signing platform, but we're building a large scale application that many from non traditional means can use to educate themselves on how to build applications of that size.
Yeah, I really love that idea. And it's actually also part of the motivation why we're doing this real world open source series, because we get so many questions from our community about kind of these real world problems that people are running into when they're using Prisma, and where maybe our documentation just doesn't cover them because it's such an edge case or such a specific requirement that they're trying to solve. So I really love that we now have these real world open source projects out in the open where people can see how others solve the same kind of problems and can use that as inspiration, or maybe even have a better idea and contribute that back to your project, right? So this is really one of the great things I think about this approach in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially for like people heading towards the intermediate to advanced stage with the technologies that they're using. It's very easy to find beginner content, but as you try to scale up, it becomes quite scarce quite fast. So yeah, alongside our Next.js picks, we also wanted to focus on type safety, which is where things like tRPC and Prisma come along. That
Mm.
way we can ensure a end-to-end type safe experience, reducing the
Mhm.
amount of bugs we have, and obviously reducing the amount of defects overall.
So, what exactly was the difference now between the stack from before the rewrite and after the rewrite? Was it that you didn't use tRPC before? I think you're now also using TurboRepo. Did you not use that before either? Or because before I think you said you used Next.js and Prisma already, but what exactly has changed before and after the rewrite?
Yeah, so we had completely swapped to the app router. We
Hmm.
had some very unfortunate use of TypeScript in the initial version, with lots of things being cast as any or unknown, leading
Hmm.
to very dicey implementations of features because you couldn't trace where things were happening. We did introduce TurboRepo on top of npm workspaces. We previously had a monorepo, but introducing TurboRepo gave us the benefit of defining relationships between packages. That
Hmm.
way, when you run build in one, you are getting the entire ecosystem built that that package needs, rather than
Hmm.
finding out midway through that you've got three versions ago of like your database models and like the access patterns there. And then, yeah, introducing tRPC replaced all of our older API routes that were
Hmm.
completely untyped as well, using just
Hmm.
fetch calls, which again was quite dicey.
That's a really, really nice stack. What I'm also curious about, actually, and I ask this to everybody that I meet who's using Prisma, how did you actually come across Prisma for the very first time? Kind of like, what's your Prisma story?
Yeah, so back in 2020, I was actually evaluating a bunch of different ORMs and database providers, basically. And I came across Prisma when it was in its 1.0 version, where you guys still had a
Mm,
whole separate GraphQL service that you had to use
right.
with the Prisma client. At the time, I didn't pick it because it required quite a bit of setup, but I did keep my eye on it. And watching it come from like version 2.0, where everything completely changed, all the way up to 5.0 now, when we have things like the JSON language protocol enabled by default. Things are super fast and they're improving
Mhm.
at a rapid rate. So it was like a no-brainer for us to stick with Prisma and not consider other things like TypeORM or Connects or anything like that.
Mhm.
Why is the database modeling for Prisma is just absolutely amazing. It's my favorite experience, second only to Laravel's
Mhm.
Eloquent from back when I was doing PHP.
That's so nice to hear. It's always nice to talk to people who have been around already in the Prisma 1 days, even though back then you haven't used Prisma yet, for good reasons, I think. And what you just said, it kind of validates our move from Prisma 1, this GraphQL proxy server that we were building, to really just being an ORM that you can run with npm install. So it's always nice to hear that this resonates with people and that this actually made you started using it. So that's a great validation, because this was a big decision for us as a company to rewrite the entire stack, to throw away Scala and the JVM and rewrite everything in Rust, the query engine that will be running under the hood. So that was a big move. It took a lot of time. It was very risky. So it's great to hear that it resonated with you and that you're now happy using Prisma ORM.
Yeah, no, it's been fantastic. I always like to keep my eye on a ton of different emerging technologies, and it's been great to see the evolution of Prisma over the years.
How has your experience with Prisma been in general? And I'm actually not only interested in kind of the good parts, you already mentioned some of them with data modeling, with the type safety, but what were maybe some tricky situations that you needed to resolve or tricky workarounds? Because I also think that this is precisely, again, what people watching this will be interested in. Like, okay, where does Prisma maybe fall short and how can you work around these situations? Do you have anything like this in mind?
No, so Prisma for us has been a really nice choice. We love the simple querying that uses the sort of JSON-based filtering. Me personally, while I love it, it's a love-hate relationship. I spent many years delving into the very specifics of SQL and like optimizing every query so it hits like the right indexes. So giving up that level of control is also quite hard.
Hmm.
Sometimes I'll be doing a larger query that includes a few connects or includes, I'm like, man, I wish I could do this my way and like hit every join. So it's just one database trip instead of having
Hmm.
to consider how many times I'm going to hit the database to get all the data that we need. Likewise, I think one of the other pain points that we experience is with JSON columns. They're really awesome because obviously you can store arbitrary metadata in it, but filtering on
Hmm.
that metadata and such requires going back down to a raw query, which
Hmm.
it can be a bit difficult, but obviously it mostly tells us that we should be considering the type of access pattern we're using when we hit those situations.
Hmm.
Everything else, though, has been absolutely amazing. The fact that we can effortlessly swap around the entire schema if we decide that using this foreign table wasn't a good idea. We want to reverse the relationship. Being able to do that with just a few simple file changes and then inspecting the migration has been an absolute game changer.
Speaking of the raw queries that you said you needed to deal with every once in a while, have you heard of this tool called SafeQL?
No, I can't say I have.
If you're using Query Raw in your application, this is definitely something that you need to check out. So it's a plugin for ESLint. It makes all your Query Raw SQL queries that you're using with Prisma type safe. It gives you syntax highlighting. It's a really amazing tool. I can only recommend you to like really check that out. In fact, we're about to publish a docs page about this as well, where we teach people how to use it. It will really boost your experience whenever you need to write raw SQL with Prisma.
No, that sounds like just the kind of thing we're looking for.
All right. I think we have a good overview of your tech stack, of some of the tricky situations that you had to resolve with Prisma. What do you say we jump a little bit into your code and you actually show us around a little bit in the project? Maybe it also inspires some of the people in the audience right now to contribute when they see the code base. They get some itching in their fingers that this is something that they want to work on. So yeah, I would love to see a little bit about the project.
Yeah, no worries. So if we look at my screen over here,
Yes.
we have the local Documenso setup that everyone
Mhm.
will have as they fork the project. They run our DX command that sets everything up with Docker
Maybe
Compose.
could you zoom in a little bit, like in your
Yeah,
browser a little bit? Just yeah, okay, that's perfect.
And then we'll find out that I'm not mobile responsive. So yeah, we have a pretty basic thing here. You have an inbox, pending, completed, and draft
Mhm.
documents. And click around. Here's one I prepared early with our supporter pledge. Toss in your emails, and then toss on a signature. Can resize that based on how big you need the signature, and so on and so forth. The
One
cool
quick
thing,
question. How was this document created in the first place? You just took a PDF file from your local file system, and then you dragged it, you drag and dropped it into this pane there where you have add a document, right?
yep, that's correct. Just like
From there
this.
you can
Yep. And this is the
beautiful.
same for everyone. Obviously, because we're using the local development environment, Next.js has to
Mhm.
go and compile all the APIs that this thing hits, so it can be a bit
Mhm.
slower
Mhm.
than it would be in production.
Sure.
But if we actually go and look at some of the things we do here, e.g., let me scale up my editor as well.
Yep. Thank you.
Also, trigger warning, light mode.
I'm a light mode user as well, so you're running into open doors here. Well, that's a German saying. I don't know if that translates into English.
It just means that you're on the right side of the battle.
Exactly.
Um, So as mentioned, we're using Next 14, which means we get server components. So instead of having to worry about get server side props, we can just do all of our data fetching right in the
Mhm.
component itself,
Mhm.
which means that we can do things like our find documents here that also
Mhm.
takes in the document status, whether it was inbox pending completed draft.
Mhm.
And then if we click through here, we'll see that we've abstracted this into our lib package in our monorepo. And
Right.
then
So we're
this is where
actually jumping across packages now, right? We started in your next app, but now we're in a different package in your monorepo.
Yep. So all of our data
Mhm.
fetching happens within this lib package. That way, if
Mhm.
we ever change anything, we're not having to worry about the specific implementation on a specific component or a
Right.
specific get server side props. The freedom to refactor as we need without worrying so much about all the usages.
Beautiful.
This is where we dive straight into our Prisma queries as well. Database access is only allowed for the most part within these lib packages.
Mhm.
So we can do really cool things like determine if there's a filter term and then add our insensitive matching on titles.
Mhm.
We can add our filters, which we use pattern matching here because it can get a bit long depending on whether we're viewing the inbox, which includes documents you've received, the all pane, which includes documents you've received and documents you've sent out, and so on and so
Mhm.
forth. But this becomes super easy with Prisma and with pattern matching, to the point where like the SQL needed to write this would be way more dicey than the simple filters that are shown here.
That is beautiful. That's really nice code.
And then, yeah, and we also have some really cool things ignoring that. And it's obviously broken in between.
Yep.
We have some really cool things with our document uploads because we are using the latest Next.js. We can go to our drop zone,
Mhm.
which is back in our, well, it's actually in our UI package now.
Mhm.
We can go find out where we're using it by pressing F12. Yeah, upload document. I always forget, so I rely on this extensively to find out where I've done things. Go to
The
our on file
F12.
drop.
I didn't know about that actually. That's a good takeaway as well for me.
Yeah, look, it might just be my editor as well. I use a mix of VS Code and Sublime key bindings since I was a diehard
Mm.
Sublime user for many years.
Good old days.
But yeah, then if we end up here, we can see that we have a thing called put file, which will take in the file that we would have dropped from our file system.
Mhm.
And the really cool part about this is that we are actually using server actions. So when we do put a file, we will potentially put it in S3, which will then
Mhm.
go and actually get a pre-signed URL,
Mhm.
which is a server action. If I grab it from here, sorry. So we have a userver at the top of this file.
Mhm.
And behind the scenes, Next.js will go and turn this into an API route, and we can go and create a pre-signed URL without it actually looking like we've ever left our like client component.
Wow.
So it creates a sort of universal experience where we can upload to S3 or we can upload to our database, perhaps the local file system or any other provider that we choose in the future. And this, of course, works really, really well with Prisma as well, because in a server, actually, we can go on defer out and actually create documents, add recipients, which is something that we use extensively when we're editing our documents.
Hmm.
So if we look for set fields for document, and then we go and find out where that's used, we'll have a server action here for add fields, and we'll see that this is used in our edit document component, which uses React Hook Form as well, because we, of course, want to be type safe. So yeah, without even needing an API specifically, like we do have tRPC, but we can actually skip it a lot because of server actions and server components,
That's
allowing
great.
for this really tight integration where you don't even know that you've actually gone out and hit something.
All right. I have two more questions that we can maybe do before we wrap up here. So first, you're using the monorepo, you said, right? I would like to just have an overview of all the different kind of packages and individual like repos, folders that you have inside of that monorepo. Would you be able to just like walk us through your side nav in VS Code basically and give a quick explanation of kind of the most important packages and what they're used for?
Yeah, of course, I'd love to. So if I drag this all the way across and I collapse everything, we will see in our monorepo that we start off with our apps, which includes our web app that we saw then, and
Hmm.
our marketing app, which is the website available at Documenso,
Right.
which includes our super fun little widget that everyone loves.
Oh, nice.
So if you ever want to
It's
see
good.
how we do our cool animations or anything like that, you're able to check it out there.
Ah.
Um,
And you're
and
using
outside
content layer for it as well, I just saw.
Yeah, yeah. Content layer is amazing for all our like static blog needs and such. We also have our privacy policy in it, which is a godsend because editing that in HTML is just terrible.
It's actually funny because content layer has been built by one of our founders, by Johannes Schickling. He is also like the author of content layer. He's really into like type safe data, basically, whether it's content or data from databases.
Yeah, well, I mean, type safe data is the way to go. I've never felt so confident working in our code base as I have now.
Yeah.
So yeah, we
And now
have
these packages, and these are shared packages that both your marketing app and the web app can access, right?
that's correct. And because we
Hmm.
have things like server actions, they can even share like the same sort of APIs without actually having an API.
Wow.
So we have our Prisma package that
Hmm.
has our client re-exported,
Hmm.
our normal binding of Prisma with a
Hmm.
special get database URL using the new data source URL that you guys introduced in like
Hmm.
5.0 or 5.1.
Hmm.
And this handles when you're running on Vercel using like a Superbase integration or a Neon database integration or even Vercel
That's
SQL.
great. Yeah.
And then we have a few extra things for when we're doing joins on Prisma and we need specific types. Not that Prisma doesn't do this, but these are
Hmm.
a bit more specific. We have our migrations, which was amazing because, again, as we did the rewrite, we also refactored our database schema very extensively to be a lot more optimized. And then we have some type guards, which are for things where we've taken the Prisma value and extended it with certain values that don't exist in the database,
Right.
as well as other things for ensuring type safety.
One more
Uh, we-
question about the types that you showed. Maybe these look like types that you construct to make the return types of some include or like some queries where you use include, like to make that type safe. But how do you actually use these? Maybe you could show an example of where this particular type is being used in your application code.
Yeah, no worries. So this will be used when we're talking about props for a component. So if I go down here, you'll see that we're using it in our add subject form props, our
Hmm.
database data table actions here, as well as like editing documents within the form props. So obviously Prisma includes a really awesome way of automatically generating types when you are fetching data. But as we're
Hmm.
passing that data down to avoid doing some awaited type of return type sort of situations, we instead declare these here. They're very few and far between because usually it's better for us to split the types out. So
Hmm.
instead of passing document with data, you would pass document, then you pass the tables that you were actually
That
wanting
makes
from
sense.
it. But yeah, on top of that, we have our tRPC, which includes our few routers for all of our API routes that we use on tRPC. So
Mhm.
sign up, creating documents, getting them by tokens and whatnot.
And you're using Zod for validation here, right? All these prefix types with
Yeah,
Z are from Zod, right?
that's correct. I have a
Mhm.
really fun habit of naming them all with a capital Z, and I've sort of
Easy to
forced
recognize.
yeah, I've forced Kellen to doing the same. So if we look at our schemas here, we have all of our Zod objects, and then we have a T prefix, which is pretty illegal in TypeScript for all the types that get inferred from Zod.
I see. Mhm.
But yeah, outside of that, we have our UI package that uses shadcn because shadcn is great and everyone knows it. Um, as well as our email package that uses resends React email, which is super
Mm.
amazing and lets us
Mhm.
have absolutely gorgeous emails without having to spend days wrangling templates.
What's the EE package, or what does EE even stand for?
So EE is for Enterprise Edition. It basically
Mm.
mimics the lib package. It doesn't contain too much because obviously, as an open source project, we don't want to take too much freedom away from you. Most of this is
Mhm.
just our subscription code for Stripe billing,
Mhm.
as well as our limits, which again relates to Stripe billing, being like if you have a free account on Documenso's app, which we just unveiled last week, you can send 5 documents a month.
I
But if
see.
you're self hosting, you can have unlimited documents.
Mhm.
That's basically the rundown of it. The core logic lives in our lib package with its client
Mhm.
only for like hooks, its server only, which has all of our data fetching and a few other things,
Mhm.
and then our universal, which will
Mhm.
contain things for our upload that we're talking about with server actions and whatnot.
Mhm. Very, very nice. Okay, I would have had so many more questions here about your test setup and about Docker and about all of this, but I think we'll leave it at this, and people can just explore the repository by themselves if they're curious. And I guess they can always reach out to you anyways if they have any specific questions, or just open a GitHub issue, right? I mean, this is a public repository that everybody can just check out and play around with. Maybe to wrap up, I would be curious to maybe just follow the data flow from the UI to the database through tRPC and just see how the data flows. Maybe we can look at the process of creating a document or updating a document. Some like fairly simple operation where the data is going from the UI to the database.
No worries. So we'll go with creating, editing a document. It's fairly
Mhm.
simple.
So
Again,
here
we
we are in
can
the React app in Next.js with the app router, right? In the dashboard route.
Yep,
Um,
that's correct. So
mhm.
we are up on this little route right here, which
Mhm.
is a multi-step form that we're working on improving. Thus, we
Mhm.
have our little document flow here. It helps us set our steps and just provide a little step thing. We have our specific things for when you add a signer. So if I were to click continue here, that would get cold. It being a
Mhm.
server action, it's a bit more opaque because we don't have a specific API endpoint for it.
Mhm.
So if we click through here, it's going to take us to our server action that's co-located.
Mhm.
And then we can go here, which will take us to our lib package
Right.
for setting the recipients, which takes us
Mhm.
straight to Prisma in
Right.
as few hooks as possible. And the best part is it's super easy to get around the code base. Like if you wanted to, edit the document, you could end up going to documents, ID, if I could spell, and then page, and just use Control P because navigating around otherwise is terrible. And then you can follow like where we get our recipients and everything. And just clicking through is going to take you directly to how we get things from the database without having all
Mhm.
these levels of indirection. Things like our sign up, we do tRPC, which is again also amazing.
Mhm.
So as you can see here, we have our tRPC, auth, sign up. It's a mutation because we're going to create something.
Mhm.
And then we call mutate async here. So if we jump across, we can see that we're in our tRPC package now within our auth router. And we also follow the same convention here, where our routers are very minimal and then they jump straight to our lib package, which actually has the logic for interacting with the database. So yeah, the data flow that we're able to get between our front end and back end and APIs is super tight thanks to things like Prisma and Zod and tRPC, as well as server components and actions. One of the big guiding patterns is that the entire code base is pretty much command clickable. You can get to anything you want without
Nice.
having to think about where it's coming from.
Yeah, and you're really, I mean, this is kind of the perfect, the prime example for end-to-end type safety, right? You can really, if you change anything in the database, you run a migration, you rename a field, delete something, TypeScript will just show the errors in all the different places, wherever it is, whether it's in like one of your lib packages, whether it's on the front end. It will just trickle down to every part of the code base where that type has been used, and it'll just require you to make that change everywhere before you can continue coding. So this is just the perfect setup to refactor your code with confidence and really make sure that you're not accidentally just forgetting something after you like refactored something or ran a migration. This is beautiful.
Yeah, and that's absolutely it. The idea is that it's easy for us and easy for contributors. People are able to contribute without fear because there's type safety literally everywhere.
This is great. Thank you so much for this overview of Documenso, Lucas. I think this was a great kickoff of our real-world open source show here that we do at Prisma. Do you want to share anything with our audience before I let you go?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we are Documenso, we are open source. If you're interested in checking out the repo, please do find us on GitHub. We also have a Discord server that we would love to see new faces in. We're working on making it a bit more exciting for everyone that's already joined. But yeah, Prisma has been a game changer for us, even from the start. And now that we're taking more better use of it, we're super excited about the future with Prisma.
That's fantastic to hear. Thank you so much, Lucas, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.